It was fun. Was it fun though? It was kind of frustrating. I have to say, I maybe don't enjoy Super Mario World as much as I did when I was a kid. That frustration doesn't really sit the same way. If I wanted a sort of like tight, fast platformer, I could have played Celeste, which is still frustrating, but there's a lot less redoing the same thing again and again. I think that modern difficult platformers are both balanced a little better around providing its frustration with like little outlets. I mean, I think even Super Meat Boy is like a little less. It is still frustrating, but like it gets you to the part that you screw up at faster. You know, one thing about this is, I mean, we did this entire stream, and I think at no point has anybody actually showed up for it. Which, I mean, while this wasn't terribly entertaining, if it was terribly entertaining, it's not like anybody would have known. So you can't really just get attention by being on Twitch, it would seem. This is something I've heard about Twitch. The algorithm is very punishing to strangers. You kind of need to already have developed a following. And if you haven't developed a following, you can't really develop one by just existing on the platform. There are hundreds of people just constantly online playing to an audience of nobody because, well, discoverability isn't terribly good on the platform, and there are just so many people making hours and hours of unwatchable content faster than anyone could ever watch it. Like, is there content to be had browsing other people's content? That's kind of a meta content. I don't think it's very good. I don't think I would watch someone watching someone else, you know? That's even further removed from anything that would be worth watching. Another thing, I don't really watch Twitch. I don't enjoy watching people play video games most of the time, so maybe that shouldn't be a kind of content that I'm engaged in making, you know? If I'm not a fan of it, how could I produce it meaningfully on my own? What I'm actually, I think, more interested in is conversational content, essay content. I think I've been more interesting now that the game is over than I was when the game was playing, because when the game was playing I had to focus a lot of my attention on trying not to screw up the game. But now that I'm just staring at a Super Mario World end screen and talking idly, I'm, I think, a lot more engaging because I don't have to focus on the game. I think one of the things that makes streamers so popular on this platform is when they're playing the same game again and again and again, because they have played the game so much that they don't really have to focus on it. That way, it can just be sort of background noise to fill the void while they sit on a soapbox and say whatever they want to their audience. So for people who come along who are interested in the game, they can watch the game because the person who's playing it has been sitting there being so proficient at it that they're watching essentially a master play the game. But also, because the person who's playing the game is now so conversant with it that they don't have to focus on the game as they play it, at least not seriously, they can sit there and hold court. They can focus their actual attention on being entertaining rather than the game itself. I imagine that a lot of popular streamers are people who are just playing the same game again and again and again forever. They just pick a game and that's their beat. Then there's the exploratory gamers. Those would be people who are like going out and trying new and interesting things. And then the adventure is kind of seeing how they react to the new and interesting thing. Okay, there's the difficulty niche gamers, of course, and I'm not going to be a difficulty niche guy because I'm just not that good at video games, and I'm not interested in becoming that good at video games, really. I'm interested in the thought process behind it. I like to analyze things. I like to think about them. And there is a lot to be had in analysis. I mean, just taking games and trying to tear them apart deeply, think about them, is, I think, an interesting topic. I think people would be interested in watching me like try to take apart a game, try to take it down to the bolts and tell you why parts of it work or why I think parts of it work. Can't really do that for Super Mario World because I'm too focused on the game while I'm playing it. Maybe strategy games could be more my niche. I mean, it is fun to watch someone build stuff, and I know that I will focus endlessly on like a what's the word? Like a city builder or an Oxygen Not Included. Anything where there's like engineering or fussing. I will fuss with stuff like that forever. At that point, you might as well just watch me work. I don't know if it's terribly interesting for other people to watch that kind of thing, although I'm not going to lie, watching people build a project is kind of fun. But, I mean, it is like watching someone glue models together. Okay, so your niches are, at least for niche, there's the person who's very talented, covering the same game again and again. There are difficulty gamers, and these are people who are like very, very talented. Virtuoso talent is interesting and exciting to watch. Speedrunners are exciting for the same reason as a virtuoso talent. They're very good at what they do. There's the novelty ones. These are people who are playing games that you've never seen before, and you're playing to watch to see what the game you've never seen before is like. And that's also interesting. That's like, that has the novelty pitch associated with it. So that would be a kind of like, everyone's seen Super Mario World 100,000 times, but if I were picking Super Nintendo games out of a hat that were interesting, the games that no one ever plays or sees, the weird ones at the bottom of the bin. Oh, excuse me, the only problem with those games are that they're not actually terribly exciting. No, I think the problem with those games is that they're painful to play. There's a certain amount of, like, sadism? Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. There's a certain amount of sadism in wanting to watch someone suffer through shitty games, You can play a shitty game on a stream, and that's good content. You suffering through that content is fun. Watching people be like, oh, this sucks, like, that can be really enjoyable. I'm just not sure if I want to put myself through it. I don't want to flagellate myself on camera for people's entertainment. So, if novelty isn't it, and virtuoso skill isn't it, and playing the same game again and again forever isn't it, you know what? I probably could play Slay the Spire again and again forever. I love Slay the Spire. That is an absolutely fabulous game. Now, watching me play Absalom with my wife, I actually do think that is kind of entertaining. Like, I think that because I have really good rapport with my wife, that leans on the idea of the development of the parasocial relationship, the expansion of parasociality, the idea that, like, you're part of a friend group with me and my wife by participating in that with us. But that, I'm not sure how healthy it is to build that kind of relationship with people online, or to encourage it. And also, I think that I'm not sure if building content that encourages that kind of relationship is necessarily adding anything to the world. It's just like, here's a person online, you could spend imaginary time with them. I should encourage people to make their own friends, and spending time with mock friends in their phone. That being said, though, I do think the rapport between me and my wife is engaging, it's charming. It's one of the reasons why I love her in the first place. She's amazing. So, that's pretty good content, but it's tough to get eyes on it. I don't know, it's not really pretty good content. It's absolutely fledgling content. We are not that skilled at this yet. Well, the only way to become skilled at something like that is to spend time doing it, which is, you have to practice. I'm practicing now. But I do think that me idly sitting here and thinking about what it means to be good at streaming is actually better content than me playing a game that everyone's seen played 100 times. Repetitive content could work. I could play Slay the Spire probably. I don't know. The thing is I've gone through that journey. I've played 100 hours of Slay the Spire just recently. I've gotten A10 on some decks, and that feels like it's probably approaching done for me. Like, I think I might have played that enough. There are probably games in that same category that I could get really deep into, just play and play and play. And that would give me a chance to sit and chat about whatever else is on my mind, because I don't have to focus too deeply on the game, because I've played it so much. I do think builder content is also a good angle for that. I think City Skylines could absolutely be a good niche for that if I wanted to dig into it. Because City Skylines is just a fun building game. It's just fun to sit there and build something and engage with that and, tinker with it. And then it can be mindless. And then you can just kind of sit there and fiddle with your city while you have thoughts. Whereas if you're playing a Twitch game like Super Mario World, you can't really sit there and have thoughts. You can't opine loudly. You can't sit and deliver a screed like the screed that I'm delivering now. Are there other kinds of Twitch content that I'm leaving out? So let's see here. Just try to see if I can enumerate it. It would be better if I had the ability to like draw or take notes while I was doing this. That would be interesting. I guess I do kind of have the ability to draw and take notes. Oh! And sit up straight. Bring up a notepad and actually think about this properly. The text editor is a notepad. The most important thing on the notepad, of course, is this Chinese food order. But under it, I can enumerate the kinds of streamer, which is, I think that was an interesting observation. It's worth recording somewhat. But then you've got your kinds of streamer. I'm going to call the virtuoso. And that's your speedrunner, where the draw is talent. Watching someone who's amazing at what they do. There's the novelty, and that's your like, look at this shit. And that's, well, okay, part of that is also just novelty, learning about something new. But then the game itself has to be something interesting. And then there's the other kind of novelty, which is this game is awful. And that's kind of a schadenfreude. It's like watching a bad thing happen to someone. It's fun to watch someone play a bad video game. And again, I don't want to do that to myself. I don't think it's actually very exciting. Well, I actually know. I love that kind of content sometimes. Watching someone suffer through a bad game can actually be really enjoyable, so long as it's not me. But I don't want it to have to be me. I don't think people would enjoy watching me be that frustrated. And I talked about this. The loop and chat. And this is playing a game so often it becomes rote. And that also becomes talent, because you watch them get very good at it. But also, it gives them a very much kind of a soapbox. And I do think that, like what I'm doing now is soapbox. It's just sitting and chatting. And I can do soapbox okay. I can like sit and just talk. And that kind of ongoing verbal diarrhea works better if you're playing a game that's very mindless. I'm not sure if there are that many games that I would actually enjoy doing that with. Slay the Spire. Building ? And then that's also, talent soapbox. And is that all the kinds of Twitch streamer that like people actually want to watch? Oh, and then I mentioned parasocial. I could just type in parasocial. You know what I mean by that. That's when someone sort of presents themselves as a relationship target. They pretend like they're your friend online, even though there's not really any relationship between you and that person. It's actually, I think, a huge part of all of these. Why come to Twitch if not for the simulation of social activity? If these are the kinds of content that actually make good content, is that meaningful? Like, is that something I'd like to make? That's maybe a good question. Do I want to make the kind of content that you would stream? And I'm not sure how attracted I am to any of these. I like essay-style content. I like sitting and actually thinking through my thoughts and organizing them and then delivering them once I've thought them all the way through, rather than thinking them live. The problem with thinking them live is you get to see the whole ugly process of me figuring things out. And on top of that, because I'm not sitting and organizing those thoughts, you get much more of the verbal diarrhea look at the way that I think, which is looping. Sometimes I'll cover the same topic again and again and again. I think I covered the repetitive nature of gameplay like 4 times while I was thinking about it, because I kept thinking about it again. I kept coming back to that loop. And so, like, watching that loop, I'm not sure if that's good content, watching me circle an idea a bunch of times. That's one of the reasons why essays do well, is because the people who deliver essays can sit and look at it in the writing phase for a while and bake and, and organize those ideas and make a list of 3 things and say, you know, like, if I had taken this kind of list and sat and thought about it and maybe tightened it up, maybe this novelty thing is actually 2 separate ideas and I need to separate them properly so that they're more clearly different, or maybe they're the same thing and I need to combine them. And that's the kind of thing that I would do in an essay format. I would look at these 2 ideas and try to determine, should this be 2 bullet points? Should this just be 1 bullet point? Where is the overlap here? Is Schadenfreude and novelty part of the same category? I don't know, but that's the sort of thing that, you know, would benefit from a writer's pass to really bake on. And so essay style content, I don't know if it is. I don't think it is a good fit for live content. You can't really deliver an essay live. You have to think about the essay offline for a while, because watching someone compose an essay live just isn't terribly exciting. I mean, you could compose the essay and deliver it live. Like, I imagine watching, like, Dan Olson deliver a presentation live is interesting, but then you want to cut that down when you're actually ready to turn it into a completed essay. One of the things that I did recently was I delivered a big essay for work about how AI is ruining coding. I mean, not to say that I took an anti-AI stance there. I just wanted to point out that it's making things feel bad. But anyways, I delivered the whole presentation live, and then after the fact, I was able to, like, chop it up into a much more watchable presentation, because the live cut is going to involve a lot of ums and ahs and, you know, breathy sounds into the microphone that you can cut out in a later pass to make a tighter final result. But the live version of that is still aggressively groomed. You still write it for days. You still make slides. You still think about how the whole thing is going to fit together, which isn't a really good fit for live content. This, watching me think through a thought, is more engaging than watching me play Super Mario World, which kind of sucked. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't think that was good content that I made when I played Super Mario World, because I'm not very good at it. And so it doesn't meet that virtuoso talent bar. Everyone's seen it before, so it doesn't meet a novelty bar. It's not that hard or unpleasant, so it doesn't meet the Schadenfreude bar. I had to focus on it, so I couldn't talk while I was doing it well, so it didn't meet the soapbox bar. Because I wasn't engaging an audience, because I wasn't really, you know, talking well while I was doing it, we couldn't fill in that parasocial gap with it. If it was at least me and my wife, they could have developed that parasociality, which could be good. I'm not even convinced that's necessarily a good direction to take your content, but it is a direction you could take your content. So that wasn't good, and it wasn't good in a whole bunch of different angles. And so trying to think of what would make it good, well, that's what we're doing now. We're introspecting about the quality of the product that we just made. And I think that introspection might be more interesting content than the content. Like, I would rather sit here and think about how to make good content on stream and share that with people, because I think that actually could be good content. It's just that sitting and thinking out loud, while that is more engaging content for a stream, has the problem that essay content like this can be kind of hard to follow. It can be kind of looping. You can not reach a good conclusion. Like, just sitting and openly thinking isn't necessarily a good way to come to a good essay. You know, it's a meandering essay. It's an essay that doesn't go anywhere. It takes forever to get to a point, and it's because you're not organizing that ahead of time. You're not able to bake those ideas into a final form. And so it's like the draft phase of an essay almost. Like, you just sit there and brew on the ideas without reaching the kind of conclusions or organization that you would get from essay content. But, I mean, I'm still going to write that down as an idea, because draft essay, or brainstorm, which is kind of what this is content. And not bad content, I think. I wouldn't consider myself, I mean, no, I write quite a bit. I wouldn't consider myself a terrible essayist, so, like, that is a thought. Like, draft essay is soapbox, so it's connected to that earlier idea of just what you're doing on stream is a game so brainless that you don't actually have to focus on it, which allows you to sit there and produce draft essay content, which is just a broad, open-air brainstorm that you can share with people who are interested in watching it. And that's, I think, one of the appeals of Twitch. Like, one of the things that people might find appealing about Twitch is something I'd find appealing about Twitch if I saw someone who I thought was an interesting speaker or thinker, watching them play a game which keeps some visual attention and focus while they thought about something and talked about it interestingly. That would keep my attention, I think. Are there other kinds of content that are interesting? I've really been into essay content lately. Review? I mean, that's a kind of content that I haven't mentioned yet. Review is tough. It's actually, I think, a legitimately useful form of content if people are interested in the thing that you're reviewing. You know, you might get a bunch of types of thing and try them out and talk about that. That's a useful thing to do. I know I am opinionated about a wide variety of objects. I think one of the negatives of review-style content is simply that it's expensive to acquire enough things to review. If you want to review vacuums, you need to buy every vacuum. If you want to review games, you have to buy every game. Reviewing video games in particular is, of course, just so, like, it's such a crowded market. And I don't think that I could differentiate myself easily trying to, review new video games. I also don't think that anybody really needs my perspective when it comes to reviewing new video games, because the perspective I bring is someone who doesn't play new video games. Like, what would people want from that? I play weird... I tend to focus on stuff like your Titanium Quartz and your Hades. I like the things that people have already told me are great. And the people telling me that those things are great, those are the reviewers. Those are the people who are filtering through mountains of trash to find the stuff that I would find interesting. And when I say mountains of trash, I don't even mean trash. I just mean stuff that's not that exciting. There's so much mediocre game out there, and that's the part that you're trying to, like, if it's bad, at least that's interesting. If it's good, of course that's interesting. But there are so many games that are just kind of okay, and filtering through that to find stuff that's worth talking about even, or thinking about even, that's, I don't know, that just seems like a lot of gray, a lot of beige to have to work through to get to anything that makes interesting content. And then, of course, if games are good enough to justify that kind of hype, you're working through a crowded market of other people also talking about the game at the same time. Who was talking about Hades 2 immediately after launch? Everybody. Everyone was talking about Hades 2 immediately after launch. That's not to say, like, there are so many cool indie developers out there, and just focusing on, like, indie content that's kind of weird and niche would be an interesting beat, Like, that's kind of an interesting thing to cover, because finding and elevating the work of interesting artists is absolutely, I think, a valuable thing to do. It's so easy to fall into just playing the game that everyone else is playing, and I don't even think it's necessarily bad. I play what everyone else is playing. I played Hades 2 and enjoyed it. I'm playing Absalom right now. That's a game that's, like, doing well in reviews, but most people don't engage with, like, small indies. And when I'm saying small indies, I mean the sort of people who post on itch.io and their game is like 5 minutes long and entirely made of fart sound effects and hand-drawn art, like one-person projects. Like, that kind of stuff is fascinating to me. And it's fascinating to me because it's so hard to actually make a video game. Like, it's everyone... Because there's so much good, high-quality content out there made by professional teams, that, like, the worst thing you're likely to play, the worst thing you're likely to encounter day-to-day on Steam is a game, and I'm saying this is the worst game you will play in a year, is probably the work of, like, 30 to 50 people who are more talented than anyone you have ever met. Making a game is really hard. I know this from first-hand experience in many cases. First of all, because I've tried to build lots of stuff in my own spare time and mostly failed. And because I work on a video game professionally, I kind of know that, like, everything is just so hard. And so every single indie game out there that exists is a miracle of the highest order. Yeah, okay, let's trim off the lowest effort stuff. You know, like the stuff that's just like a guy AI coding some crap over the weekend, and you know that doesn't really. I don't want to say that doesn't count. I do kind of want to say that doesn't count. If you're not actually making the art, nothing of value has been made. If it's easy, then what's the point? But I do think that, like, anybody who has ever released a game in their spare time has produced art that is a borderline miracle. It's very hard to make a video game, and I do think that there is an interesting value to taking work of that nature and just elevating it, just gushing about it to strangers, just taking a look at like really small indie content and trying to lionize it by maybe just shining a light onto how difficult some of this stuff is. That's kind of an interesting idea for, like, I think I would watch content that focuses on taking indie stuff like that and just trying to bring it to a bigger audience. And so, yeah, I'll make a little footnote for that. Like, I think that reviewing hyper niche indie content could be valuable. I don't know if it would necessarily be popular, but I think it could be, like, valuable. Like, it's a good thing to do. And it's a good thing to do because hyper niche indie content has ideas you won't see anywhere else because they're not profitable to pursue. And I think it's a valuable idea because if anybody needs that attention, it's hyper niche indie creators. Not all of them, mind you, but, like, making it on your own is impossible. So most of these people have day jobs. If one of them gets really popular on the back of something you're able to push their way, that's, like, a huge win. The problem with regular review content is just that it's so saturated. No one needs my opinion on... I don't even know. I don't even know what's out right now. And that's also a problem, is that I'm just not interested enough in the zeitgeist, interested enough in the current video game that I even know what the current video game is, let alone have an opinion on it that's worth defending. Gosh. I do. I look up to Quinns. I think Quinns is an interesting journalist. And I think part of the reason he's an interesting journalist is because he decided to think carefully about the kind of content he wants to make and really focus on making that kind of content. And in his case, the beat is lionizing indie developers and trying to push people away from the biggest video game in the world. The biggest pencil and paper game in the world, which is Dungeons and Dragons, at least in that space. But it's like, that's an interesting beat. That's an interesting idea. I'm glad that someone is doing it, and I'm glad that someone as interesting as Quinns is doing it. You know? So yeah, I think if I were to do review style content, I know the kind of review style content I would immediately focus on, which is hyper niche indie content, because that's, I think, the only thing that's... you know what? I want to say that that's the only thing that's worth reviewing. That's not fair. I think that people who review legitimate, like, people who review Grand Theft Auto 6 are still doing good work. It's just that they're fighting with everyone else also reviewing Grand Theft Auto 6. As soon as that game comes out, there's going to be 100 reviews from every major review outlet. They're all going to say approximately the same thing, but there are going to be interesting takes on that game. There are going to be thousands of interesting takes on that game. That's going to be a big conversation. And so rushing to be a part of that conversation is meaningful. You want to have a good take quickly. I'm just not sure if I want to be part of that conversation about whatever the most recent game is. If there's a Slay the Spire is really hot right now. I have a lot of opinions about Slay the Spire, but it's a huge game. There are so many other people who have opinions who get there first. Am I just refusing to compete because I think I'll lose? Is that a thing that I'm doing? Am I, like, giving up preemptively? Sometimes I don't know if choosing a niche that other people haven't chosen before is the kind of behavior of someone who is not confident in the quality of their work and trying to find a niche that no one occupies is fundamentally not a confident stand. I'm saying, like, if in any market I will be outcompeted because I'm not very good, so I have to find a market that no one will compete with me in. And then when I get to that market, when I get to those markets, I'm always like, oh, what a sad, piddly little market. Why, I can see why no one wants to compete here. Maybe I'm setting myself up for disappointment by just lacking enough self-confidence to commit to anything that might be hard. It's a legitimate possibility. Maybe I would be good as a reviewer of popular video games, because popular video games are things that people want to hear about. It's just, and so by trying not to participate in that because I'm worried that it's too competitive, I am also denying myself access to the only market that has any meaningful traffic. Okay, so review is a type of content. I've had some thoughts about it. I've had some very vocal thoughts about it, but one of them is hyper niche indie content. And another thing to note here is that thought I just had, which is that sometimes you avoid niches that seem overcrowded, which seems wise, but may simply be cowardly. Maybe I'm not wise. Maybe I'm just afraid of competing. Well, I don't know. I think that's good introspection. I think it's good to think maybe sometimes I avoid doing things that could compete with popular things because I assume I'll be outcompeted by more popular things. It's funny. I was talking about review content very broadly, and then I went right to video games because that's the thing that I care about. I do care about games. Like, I kind of love the whole gamut. I like video games. I like board games. I like pencil and paper RPGs. I just like game-style experiences with people. But I don't like any specific thing. It's the problem with being broad but not deep, is that I like video games, but I don't love video games. I like board games, but I don't love board games. I like TTRPGs, but I don't love TTRPGs. It's hard to think of anything that I'm extremely passionate about, and I think that this is the kind of stuff that you have to be extremely passionate about in order to succeed. And that can be difficult at times. The idea that I can't really muster the passion for some of these things that I would need in order to, I think, succeed. And, I can't care about board games as much as a professional board games reviewer. I can't care about video games as much as a professional video game reviewer. And I don't think can't is really necessarily the right word there. Maybe it's that gap that it needs to go from someone who takes something casually and something professionally. The idea is not that a board game reviewer is someone who loves board games so much that they can make them their job. I think the idea is that someone who is a board game reviewer is someone who liked board games a lot and then became a goddamn professional. And a professional treats it like a job. It's not about loving the thing so much that being a professional comes to you naturally. Liking something enough to want to commit to become a professional. And then you do the work, and sometimes the work feels like work because it's not always going to be something that you do because you love. That's, I think, maybe a better way to look at things. I would describe that as how I became a professional programmer, how I became a professional software developer. It's like, I really, really like building software. I love computers. I love learning about computers, but I don't love it so much that I would do it all the time, forever, as my only hobby. It can't be everything, but I do like it enough that I was willing to make it my whole career. I like it enough that I was willing to take it very seriously, learn a lot more about it, learn about it even when I didn't feel like learning about it because it was my career and I had to. Maybe that level of professionalization is what's necessary to make good content. Like, you just need to be a professional about the things that you devote yourself to. And one of the reasons that I don't do that for hobby content is because I don't want another job. Because I don't want to take something that I like and turn it into something that feels like work. And that's absolutely, I think, a problem with the kind of content that people can make in their spare time. If you productize your spare time, if you take your spare time and say, I'm going to turn this into a business, if you want that business to be successful, you have to treat it like you're a professional. And if you treat it like a professional, it means you're going to be doing a lot of stuff that you don't necessarily enjoy, which turns it into a job, which means that you're spending your free time doing a job. And that sucks. It's not really leisure time at that point, and the idea of turning leisure activity into something that's profitable is maybe sort of fundamentally flawed in that way. Maybe you shouldn't try to turn your joy into a business. And yet, one of the reasons I'm doing this, one of the reasons I'm experimenting with Twitch, one of the reasons that one of the things that I'm doing right now is trying to expand my horizons, to find careers that are worth, not careers, I don't know, just to expand, to broaden my horizons a little bit, to think through other things I could do with some of my time and effort. And it's partially because, as a result of AI coding becoming a big deal, I'm not enjoying programming professionally as much as I used to. It takes a lot of the joy out of that. And so now I need to find something that I like to do as much as I used to like programming. And I think that has forced a lot of this introspection on me, a lot of this trying to look at kinds of content that people can make. A big problem for that is just that, programming is very much life on easy mode. Everyone needs programmers. Not currently, but for a long time. It's been an enormously in-demand job. So a lot of people do it and aren't even terribly good at it. It's a low bar, I think. I don't think people actually have to be terribly good at programming to become or remain employed. And so simply by virtue of caring about it at all, I managed to, I think, stand out as a relatively good software developer. I don't want to say I'm certainly not a top tier programmer. I'm not even a mid tier programmer. I'm just an okay programmer. I am an okay software developer, and I'm pretty okay with that, to be honest. That can feel to me kind of like a fundamental lack of ambition. Being okay with being okay is a weak stance on life. It's a soft man's look at how to do things, and I do think of myself as soft sometimes, as not deserving of the success that I've enjoyed because I've been playing the game on easy mode. If I look into spaces that aren't the safe harbor that is software tech work in the past 30 years, well, things are a lot more competitive, and if I want to actually be able to compete in these arenas, I'm going to have to step up my game, work harder, be more professional. That's one of the reasons why, I'm a software developer and not an artist. It's because art is hard, and software development is not. It's much easier, I think. It's much easier because if you've been able to do it remotely well for the past few decades, you've been basically guaranteed a job. Whereas being able to do art well enough to compete against the tens of thousands of talented artists out there is really hard. It's one of the reasons why I think my wife, who is a professional working artist, is more talented and impressive than I am in a lot of ways, in most ways, because she took the hard career. She went into the hard career. She went into the space where you have to be that good in order to stay afloat, in order to compete. And it's not a kind industry. They do not treat her as well as they treat me. It turns out that because art is so competitive, because so many people are talented at it, it's a really difficult career. And so it doesn't pay as well as software. It's not just harder from a difficulty standpoint, but like it pays less, the perks are worse. It is a more difficult life path. And it's a more difficult life path for a lot of reasons, but it's partially because that work isn't considered as valuable. Whereas by finding a job that is, I don't know, cushy and considered valuable, and I say this with big air quotes, I've managed to enjoy a lot of privilege that you wouldn't enjoy in an artistic career. I get paid more, I have to work less, and that's really nice. But it is the easier route, and I am concerned I've become soft because of it. And so now, when I'm trying to find a way to make a potentially different path for myself, the fact that I have never let a path of least resistance go unignored in my life is coming back to bite me a little bit, it seems. It's possible I'm just too lazy to produce creative content. I'm wondering if this introspection isn't wandering into self-excoriation. This maybe isn't a productive path to wander down. Instead, maybe I should focus on what I can do that's useful or interesting. What kind of content I could meaningfully produce. And a big problem is the open-endedness of that. When I work for other people, they tell me what content they want produced, and I produce it on their behalf. I contribute ideas, but I rarely spearhead my own initiatives. I am currently spearheading my own initiative at work right now. I've been pushing on it really hard, but that is a rare occasion that I take a project that I just want to exist for its own sake, and I've been pushing on that very hard as of late. And in fact, I've been pushing on that so hard it has taken away time that I would use to develop personal projects, and that's probably fine because I don't know what I want to do for a personal project where I've at least selected a work goal that is worth fighting for the next little bit. Ugh, I feel like I've been talking for a while and haven't really gotten anywhere. What time is it? 1:50. Almost 2 in the morning. I'm just talking endlessly to myself until 2 in the morning about content, strategy, and life goals. I think we're done with Super Mario World, though. If you did watch, if you were a person who actually watched this, thank you for watching. And I say this like someone might watch the thing after the fact. One of the things that, like, I do think I could do interesting review content. I do think reviewing hyper niche indie content is an exciting and interesting thing to get into. But I've always kind of wanted to make something of my own, something creative of my own. Somehow reviewing other people's work has never really fit into that niche, but at the same time, it's like essay content, review content is fundamentally analysis. It's not creative work of its own. I wonder if it's not more up my alley to produce analysis rather than first order creativity. I tend to be kind of an analyzer. I am not sure if I can produce good first order creative content. And on top of that, the production of that kind of first order creative content does require a single-minded devotion that I have struggled to muster for much of my life. Like, I can write, but I don't think I could write a book that people would engage with. And I think that's partially because I'm not dogged enough to stick to it long enough. I'm not dedicated enough to read hundreds and hundreds of books just to I've read hundreds of books, but I think that the kind of close reading you want to do when you're learning to become a talented writer is different from just casually reading books to enjoy them. I think that there is an element of taking stuff apart that you'd want to do if you were interested in becoming a professional writer. And that's the thing, is as I mentioned earlier, there are things you have to do to become a professional, and those things are work. And the way to become a professional in anything is to find what the work is and then do it. And in the case of many of the things that I enjoy doing as hobbies, if I look at the work involved in becoming a professional at those things, I am not necessarily interested in bridging the gap between hobbyist and professional by doing all of that work. I'll start doing that dozens of times, but then after no more than a few weeks, I will get sick of it, and then I'll stop. And I'll stop because I can, because it's not my real job, because I don't actually have any skin in the game, because I already have a difficult job that I do at work, and having one difficult job is enough difficult jobs, I think, for anybody. Why make myself miserable for no reason? And I'm never really sure if that's a healthy outlook on life, or if that is me being too lazy to achieve any goals outside of work. But sometimes talking aloud like this does help. I'm not sure if it does help. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the problem with the stream format, the problem with just talking into a microphone endlessly, is that it's a draft essay format. It's a format that focuses on brainstorming, which is loose, circular thinking. It doesn't really have a goal. It doesn't focus itself. You can't really develop ideas the way you can when you're working on them for an essay format. Not to say that I don't think it's meaningful, I just think that it's a little looser. That being said, I am really interested in pulling a transcript of this content out, and I don't know, maybe I'll take the audio, I'll bake it into a transcript, and then I'll pass it to an LLM to tidy it up and see if it can't extract like a few useful concepts out of all of this loose blathering, and then maybe I could structure that as an essay, or just have it identify a couple of important questions that I need to answer or think about or focus on. This is a brainstorming process, but from the brainstorming process, I would like to get to the point where I could build an essay, build a more coherent series of thoughts that would involve boiling and baking and prodding and thinking and summarizing and building parts of this into more of a cogent thesis. The thesis here is kind of trying to find out what I want to do, what kind of content I want to make. And that has been a difficult road to figure out. It's been many, many years of me trying to search for a kind of content that would both be popular and resonant enough that people would actually engage with it meaningfully, but also something that I would enjoy producing enough that it's something that I could stick to. Confronting my own ability to produce content, I think of myself as a workhorse in many ways and lazy in many other ways, and maybe I need to confront some of those things about myself. I don't think of myself as fundamentally lazy, but I do think of myself as easily distracted, and that could be a problem that I need to face more head on if I do want to accomplish any of my goals. I don't know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the output from this and look at it. Look at it for a while, because I think that might be a good idea. Anyways, thanks for watching. Nobody actually watched this as far as I can tell, but thanks anyways.